Okay, so I've got a follow-up on the Madness deck. It's been evolving. It it's a tough thing to kind of get a handle on simply because the format's very diverse. There are a lot of threats, and in addition to that, mana's a challenge in this format. I mean, this deck really wants to be 3 colors or 4 or 5, and it would if we had cards like City of Brass, maybe 5. If we had cards like just Yavimaya Coast and things like that. I mean, these duels are doing an okay job of imitating what we need, but it's the tempo. Like you're forced to play a long game. You can't play a fast game with this because you're slowed down by your lands. On the other hand, it does a very good job in the long game, as you'll see. The extra life from the lands, potentially up to 12 life in a single game because of Simic Growth Chamber picking up the life gaining lands, really seems to add up and seems to matter. Occasionally you'll win a game at like 1 and realize that one less Swiftwater Cliffs or Thornwood Falls and you wouldn't have made it. So there's a couple of things going on in the main that are different. The deck really wanted removal. Fiery Temper and Firebolt are the 2 best removal cards, I think, for this deck. You'd think Lightning Bolt, and Lightning Bolt is certainly one of the best removal cards around, or Electrickery, which is also an extremely good card, but actually Electrickery feels more like a sideboard card, and Lightning Bolt, well, the problem with it is that you want to be able to discard cards to your Madness outlets, and Lightning Bolt doesn't really play nicely with that, where Fiery Temper and Firebolt both do. You can either pitch the Bolt and replay it later in the game, or pitch the Fiery Temper and play it immediately. And that's pretty relevant often enough that I don't think that Lightning Bolt would be better. So, but I'll keep an eye out for it because Lightning Bolt is one heck of a card after all. Wild Mongrel also turns a Fiery Temper into a 4 damage of Fire Blast for 1 red, which is relevant at times as well. So let's see. I don't think there's a lot that can be said about this deck other than what's in the main. I've taken out the Careful Studies. I did leave 1 Faithless Looting. I swapped, since we're running red, we get the Superior Careful Study. This functions as 2 of them. 1 now and 1 later, which is really nice. And I ran 1 main deck Gorilla Shaman because I think there's enough things out there. There's enough equipment and artifact lands where you can occasionally just luck your way into a early Shaman against somebody running artifact lands and just almost end the game on the spot with the power of Mox Monkey crushing their mana base. And after sideboarding, I'm actually missing some cards. It's a cost issue. I would very much like to go 4 Hydroblast and 4 Pyroblast, 4 Ancient Grudge, most likely, 1 extra Mox Monkey, and 2 Multani's Decree. So that's kind of what I'd like to have, but because I don't have the other 3 Pyroblasts. That's where I ran out of cash, so I have 3 Electrickeries instead, which they're a very good card, very good against elves, as a matter of fact. And it could be the case that that maybe the Ancient Grudge and Multani's Decree, since we have Gorilla Shaman, maybe these could be consolidated into the there's a green instant, I believe. It's 1 green, destroys a artifact with casting cost 3 or less. But I'm not sold that artifact or enchantment rather, and I'm not sold that that's the right way to go. I actually don't know how this deck would do against Boggles, which is one of the main things Multani's Decree is in there for, but it's also in there for decks with white that run COP green in the sideboard, occasional red decks that are running enchantments that deal damage to you over the course of time. So it seems pretty good for now to leave it be. I would very much prefer to have Ray of Revelation like I did before and run a Plains, but mana's been... I actually had to increase the mana base and cut a color, and I'm still kind of working it all out. So let's take a look at some games now and see how that goes, because I think you'll enjoy some of these games here. I'm just going to run the ones from today, which it's late, so there's only a few of them, but these were, I think, some good games and should be indicative of what you can expect with this version of the deck, if this is the kind of thing that may, that appeals to you. So as of this morning, I have for the day, and roughly, what was it? I went 4-1 in matches, which is pretty nice. And this version initially had Calny Garden. You can see how much worse this is. This became the green-blue dual land, so you can see how much worse that is. I had some kind of mix between the two, and obviously it's fairly terrible right here. My opponent's playing mono red, and it's got a Searing Blaze is probably the worst card that they can have early. This Thermo Alchemist certainly isn't too nice either. So I'm able to at least take that thing off the board with a Fiery Temper. And pump my Mongrel and get in for some damage, so swing the tempo just a little bit in my favor. If it wasn't for the fact that, well, my opponent's going to Rift Bolt that Mongrel, it actually ends up working out for me, because if he's targeting the Mongrel, then he's not targeting me, and it's possible that I will have trouble racing if he doesn't target my creatures. So right here, I kind of want to race, but he's really low on cards, and it made more sense for me to dig for solutions and pressure than it did to try to get the Mongrel on the board and just swing for the fences. I play the Looter for the exact same reason. If I can draw fire, that's excellent, and if not, well, unfortunately, Searing Blaze doesn't do that function very well at all. So the problem here is that obviously I'm looking for either a way to kill the Alchemist outright or a way to stabilize a little bit, which would be a second blue source. That Calny Garden really is hurting me by being, a Calny Garden and not. And the reason it was in there was because it's good against edicts. So when your opponent plays effects that make you sacrifice your guys, Calny Garden can give you a free thing to sacrifice. But here my opponent plays a very odd play. He's bolting me and pumping his guy, but he blocked. And that means if he runs out of gas here, I could actually win this game. No. Alright. If I had been able to untap there and maybe get another pickup land, or I don't know, something. But it wasn't looking good, and a big part of the reason for that was the Calny Garden. So we'll finish this game, and then I believe after this one I fix the mana base a little bit better. But 2 more to go. Alright, so a win, or obviously I want to play first against this deck, and was hoping to hit a turn 2 land from my Merfolk Looter there, but I do not. So I get Rift Bolted, and he plays a Curse of the Pierced Heart. This is the kind of thing where what I was saying against the red decks. There's that craptastic Calny Garden again, not giving me life. Alright, well, at least here I can clear out his 2-1. I'm getting bolted, so I'm going to take some extra damage. And Fire Blasted? No, I can't be Fire Blasted. That one I'm going to have to Hydro. And it's really unfortunate that I did, because I wanted to Hydro Blast the Curse off the board. So now I'm on a pretty significant clock, but I can put my opponent on a bit of a clock, and we'll see if I can race it. Alright, well, I certainly cannot use my life total any further for accepting damage. I'm just going to have to try to counter everything that my opponent could possibly do, and a timely Hydroblast removes my opponent's clock here. I've got the 1 Faithless Looting to go with the Root Wallow, which is nice. Might get me some card advantage in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and logic that. The one and only Faithless Looting, but it also means that I can, well, if only I had had a second land there. I'm going to have to regretfully throw away that Arrogant Worm, because even though I'd like the clock, I don't have time. You'll notice that the game will actually remove it for Madness, and then when you can't pay the Madness, it makes its way to your graveyard. So if you are wondering how that works out. But my opponent's a little bit heavy on mana. Alright, so we're going to logic that. And I'm using logics because I don't expect that he's going to play any instants on my turn that I'm going to use the logic to pump a Wild Mongrel with. And I want to use the logics now because if my opponent did have some way to interact with the graveyard, like an unexpected an unexpected Bojuka Bog, for example, then I would like to make sure that I've used the logics which would be affected by that. Alright, so I can't pump here and I can't play Gorilla Shaman. I just didn't cut the Mox Monkey simply because I didn't have enough cards to cut, so I just left the one in. But also, I wasn't sure if my opponent might have something like the artifact that interacts with the graveyard and costs 1 mana. Gorilla Shaman can at least, you know, act as a distraction, maybe draw a bolt if I'm lucky, and at any rate potentially threaten that artifact. But didn't see it, so alright, my opponent's got that early curse again, which is rough, but it makes more sense for me to get a looter down, because if it lives then I probably win. And on his turn he suspends 2 Rift Bolts, which is crazy. I'm digging for lands, cannot find them. Okay, digging again, still cannot find them. Have to throw away a counter spell. My opponent's deciding to go ham on direct damage straight to the face. I've taken a billion. Alright, well, I certainly can't afford to not counter that or get rid of that curse, so we're going to try and do exactly that. I'm throwing away Faithless Looting here just because I don't really have anything great to loot away, and my opponent makes a mistake of killing the Root Walla. And opponents do make mistakes like that, as this game demonstrates. If you've been observing how this deck actually works, the most important card is the Merfolk Looter. Alright, so I'm thinking, do I want to actually counter here, or do I want to logic here? Decide to logic, and I was glad I did, because I logic into an Ash Baron, so that lets me maximize my mana utility. Fire Blasted to 2, but not killed. I have to assume that the last card in my hand is either, well, it's either something that he didn't have the mana for, or something that he just could not, something that's just not useful. But I'm going to have to, like for example, he may have another Fire Blast and just doesn't have the second mountain. Alright, so I'm going to counter that with a logic. I think perhaps I should have counterspelled there, hard countered it. But I wanted to loot. Try looting here, and because I get Multani's Decree, I'm going to take a big risk and assume that the last card in his hand is just not useful, and accept a point of damage here in order to gain 2 life and deal with that thing. I brought the Decrees in specifically for the curses that I know that they run. So I'm at 3 now, so if he, pretty much any removal will kill me, so I'm digging to find logic and land, and I find logic but no land, like struggling to find some land. And luckily for me, his direct damage is not direct, it's the Firebrand Archer, so, or his damage is not direct. So I'm back to stabilizing or semi-stability. I throw away Multani's Decree. We've seen enough curses to where I don't think that's going to be useful. I'd really love to have looted away an Arrogant Worm, but I'm unwilling to tap out, so I just stop looting. I'm digging for lands, like frantically trying to find lands. It's getting absolutely absurd here. And then I realize my opponent actually is at 10, which means I actually can go lethal. So we're going to go for it. Pump the dog up. And not even bother with a bunch of card advantage. It doesn't matter. Oh, excuse me. And which is one of the nice things about having the direct damage in the deck. And my opponent has, for his last card, Fire Blast. He actually drew the land that turn, I guess. But I never tapped out, so fortunately we're in good shape. And that's a wrap. So tight game, very close one, but manageable. It was made much harder by the fact that if you look here from the Ash Barons on, so it's 11 cards of 11 non-lands, plus I drew the looter, so I drew 12 non-lands in a row. It was very, I mean, it turned out to be fine, but it was kind of frustrating too. Alright, anyway, that's Magic Online for you. So we'll move on to game 2 and or round 2 and against Mark 1987 here, and I end up not winning here, but I have to take a risky keep for starters. I'm gonna keep because it has 1 land and a looter, and I have a Firebolt in case my opponent was playing like Delver or something. But no, he's playing red-green aggro, and I'm not prepared for this deck mentally. I have not faced it. I don't exactly... I understand big creatures here, but I don't understand the extent of it. And it ends up hurting me quite a bit. So, as you'll see, because I tap out right here, which was a huge, huge mistake, because this is the turn of the Blastoderm. And for that exact reason, I should not have tapped out. I hadn't even considered Blastoderm, that it was legal for the format, which is amazing. If Fires of Yavimaya were also legal, I would strongly consider playing that myself. Blastoderm is also an interesting card potentially for this deck. Like, it's just such an insane... It's 3 Lava Axes, right? It's an insane card. But it doesn't really fit the theme of the deck, and you certainly don't want to tap out most times. So anyway, I'm going to try to deal with the threats that he has in play. I kill his Reach guy because I'm concerned that it would grow, potentially becoming even worse of a problem. So I drew the one Gorilla Shaman, but as you can see, it's not really going to hurt me here much because I can convert it into cards with the Looter or feed it to the dog. So still in a really horrible spot. I might be able to kill the Kavu if I want to. I suppose that's what I'll do. I think perhaps I should have killed the Blastoderm itself, but alright, so we're going here. But actually, I'm kind of stabilizing. One more hit from the Derm and then I'm set. And I've got a counterspell. But I make a tremendous, tremendous mistake here. So he sends in, I loot, that's fine. Take some damage. And this is my error. Why did I let Horned Kavu resolve? I basically just gave him a 3/4 and a 5/5 who will kill me. And that's pretty much all you need to see of this game. In a couple of turns, I'm dead. Because I died to that Blastoderm that he picked up and the 3/4 that bashed my face in repeatedly. So I had sideboarded just the Wind and some stuff that I was trying out, and I keep thinking that that card should be good, but well, you can kind of see how this game's going to go. Another land problem. So in this version right here, I was still running 20 lands. It was after that I switched out and went to 22 and ended up getting rid of the County Gardens as well, which made the deck just play a lot smoother. So the next 3 will have 22 lands, and they all go pretty well. Alright, so this one was against Doc Dan JP and gave me a run for my money, if I remember, with a first turn Curdape. And I was thinking, wow, I didn't even realize Curdape was legal either. I guess Wild Nakatl is too. Kind of interesting stuff. This format is funky. Luckily, he doesn't have a forest right away, so I'm able to, thanks to Ash Barrens, I'm able to take his Curdape out before it grows. And that's nice. I mean, it's deal withable. It could have been dealt with a Wild Mongrel or a Root Wallow, but it's nice to get it off the board now and just not have to worry about it. I'm going to play a card I've never seen before, I swear. Nyla's Presence. But that's an amazing card. It enchants a land and makes it every land type and you draw a card. Which means that it enables Domain. It's a card drawing spell that gives you Domain for 2 mana and fixes your mana. It actually seems like too good, which is kind of cool. And my opponent's taking full advantage of it. That seems to be his key card. He also has an Abundant Growth there, but Makta Rioters there, it's 3 mana 5/5 because it's a 1/1 for each land type, and he has all 5 with that enchantment. Anyway, I send in everything and pump the Wild Mongrel here. You can see how it's acting like a Lava Axe. I thought about double pumping, but I decided that I might actually need to kill his next creature if he has another big one, so I saved the Fiery Temper instead. And I think it turns out to be correct. He goes for Tribal Flames here. So pump Mongrel. So that Tribal Flames will deal 5 damage because of the enchantment he's got out. But because I saved the Fiery Temper, I'm able to actually save the Mongrel here. And I think that's pretty good. So we'll clear out his guy, throw away an island, and He kills nothing. Send in the team. Pump, and I believe pump the mongrel as well for extra damage. Drop him to 3. So now he's got 4 creatures that can all deal 3 damage. He would have to sweep the board somehow, and then well, if he swept a full sweep, if it wasn't electricity, like electricity would kill mongrel, for example, but then he would need a blocker, and if it wasn't that, then I don't know what he could have, but apparently he did not have it, whatever it might have been. There is a 4 casting cost threshold card that deals 5 to all creatures without flying, but he didn't have threshold, and I haven't seen anyone play it at all. I suppose, like, I've been considering it for a control deck because it's the only sweeper I've found that seems to be fairly consistent, but that'd have to be a different design altogether. Alright, so I'm going to go for early looter and hope it lives, because if it lives I probably win. It's very, very hard to lose with an early active looter, and this game proves to be no exception. He swings into I could throw down Basking Rootwalla or Arrogant Worm. I'd have to pump the Rootwalla, but Worm makes a lot more sense, obviously, so we'll do this. Even if he kills the Worm with a bolt now, I've already gotten my card advantage. Quite a bit of it, actually. Instead he plays an Aura Gnarlid, which a thing that will grow to get some of his enchantments out, so I'm a bit concerned of that. But I have to play my tapped land and gain a life and wait before I have the red mana to deal with it. And unfortunately he Core Skyfishes, and I think he might have misclicked. He picks up his Terramorphic Expanse instead of a basic land there, but okay. Either way, I'm going to go ahead and bolt that Aura thing off the board, loot right here, and then looking to make sure that I play the best land possible. I might have wanted to play a Simic if I could have found one. I did not, so I play a Thornwind Falls. You can see how much life I'm actually picking up over the course of these games here, and how much smoother the deck is playing out now that I actually have 22 lands, including the 4 Thornwinds. Like this game here was completely enabled by that addition, and the mana base just works a lot better. So, and like I said, in active looter, it's just not. I don't want to say it's not beatable, but it's pretty darn, like, there's a very high correlation between an active looter early and winning the game, and a game win. So anyway, well, it's got an early Delver, but I do have a Fiery Temper, so I have long-term solution here. He's got an elusive Spell Fist, so it looks like he can push a lot of damage. I'm pretty worried, but he doesn't flip the Delver, so there is that. Double Island Plains. I haven't played against a deck like this, so I'm not exactly clear on what I should be expecting. Well, apparently it's just lots of Delvers of Secrets. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and Ash Baron Cycle and then play Mongrel and just kill a Delver right now. I'd very much prefer to play the Looter, but the Mongrel means that he has to flip Delver, which he does, and he would have to using Emerge Unscathed, unfortunately. I was going to say, and then he would need something to push through with his elusive Spellfist, but yeah, I'm not in good shape at all. I've got a counterspell here where I can deal with his Emerge Unscathed, so he doesn't give his guys pro color on this turn and the next turn with the rebound, but the tempo is just too much. I'm digging for removal for the flyer, and I just can't find any of it, and I lose. And I think at this point of I think in this version, actually, I did not have the full set of 8 removal spells, which was the other change that I made. And so this was one of those matches where I realized, like, that was probably wrong. Alright, let's see if the theory about early looter holds. Opponent has a Jeskai Sage to go with his insect. So I'm going to get a loot into follow-up play as Ash Barons, finding a mountain, playing a mongrel. Opponent flips insect with a Git Probe, has a Think Twice, is smashing in for 6. I am going to loot away a Basking Rootwalla and attempt to trade the Rootwalla and the mongrel for his 3/3. I don't want to I'm willing to make this exchange only because the cards in my hand are so strong that I don't think that it's worthwhile to pitch them to Mongrel. And also because it puts 2 cards in my graveyard, and I have that Circular Logic in my hand, and I wanted to make sure that it could do something. So he tries to think twice out of the graveyard. I'm just going to logic it simply because I want to use my looter. I have very little to do with it right now, and luckily for me, on the next turn I draw 4, and I do it leaving a red untapped, specifically so I could potentially find Fiery Temper, and I do, or another removal card. So I get Delver off the board. Opponent plays Think twice and a Journey to Nowhere to get rid of my looter. But I've drawn a lot of cards that I'm able to play a counterspell game with him for a little bit. He then plays the Seeker of the Way. However, I can just Firebolt that down, and that Firebolt threatens his next 2 toughness or less creature, which is really nice. So he plays Sen's Enlistment, which gives him 2 1/1 Kithkin, and he can retrace, which means he'll be able to play that every time he draws a land. For my turn, I get a Deep Analysis, and I play a pickup land and pass. Opponent goes for another Sen's Enlistment. I try a Counterspell, which for the second time, which sticks. He flashes back his Think Twice. On my turn, I play a Merfolk Looter and a Mongrel. He plays a Sen's Enlistment and a Journey to Nowhere. I let the Sens go off, but the Journey to Nowhere I'm going to Circular Logic through the Mongrel because Looter is not active yet. I find myself a Firebolt, so I'm going to go ahead and send in with the Mongrel, see if he'll double block. He single blocks, that's fine. Play land and pass. I gain a life though. He goes for a Journey to Nowhere, and I'm able to loot into a Logic, which is really nice there since I didn't have a counterspell in my hand at all. Plays Sen's Enlistment, attacks for 1, and I get to free kill it with an Arrogant Worm that comes down through the via Mongrel, and allows me to turn the pressure around. So I found a Firebolt somewhere in there, so I'm going to go ahead and send in for 6. So I'm feeling a lot more comfortable, but I don't want to reveal it, so I flash back the Firebolt in my graveyard instead. Opponent sends in, and I get to make the same play I made last time. He plays his Sen's Enlistment from the graveyard with Retrace, but attacks for 1 into a second Arrogant Worm. On my turn, my opponent has 4 1/1s in play, and I'm able to Firebolt 1 of them, and then send in with 2 Arrogant Worms and a Mongrel. And I Firebolt 1 of them because with 3 in play, he won't be able to quad block one of the Arrogant Worms, and I can't play Firebolt as an instant, of course. So after doing so, he tries to block a Mongrel. I just trade a bunch of lands for his guys, which is kind of funny because he was playing his Sen's Enlistments off of Retrace. They were lands to begin with. So, and at this point, my opponent scoops it up at 6 life, facing down 2 Arrogant Worms, a Wild Mongrel, and an active Merfolk Looter. Again, the key to everything. I did at one point try adding in a 5th Merfolk Looter, Thought Courier, but I think I'd rather have the Faithless Looting because you can get in situations where it's better to have a non-creature way to do your loot. Like when you're facing down decks that have so much removal that you just cannot stick regardless of whatever number you have in your deck, you're just not going to stick one. You're playing into their hands. And in cases like that, the ability to just Faithless Loot is very strong. So anyway, here's a situation where my opponent actually has a Circle of Protection green. I send in with a Mongrel. He doesn't activate. He knows that I'll just pop my Mongrel in. He'll change colors. My opponent plays a Seeker of the Way. I'm going to send in with both Mongrels again, getting in some damage, but I guess he's feeling alright because once he gets enough mana, he'll be able to repeatedly respond to me trying to change colors by using COP green over and over. He sends in with a Seeker of the Way, and I flash out a Basking Rootwalla to block. Opponent plays a Think Twice, which makes his guy a 3/3. So I'm not going to get card advantage here, but I do get a nice tempo swing, and I'm still willing to make that exchange. And I Pyroblast his Delver of Secrets off the board, send in with both Mongrels deep analysis myself and pass. One is a Jeskai Sage for his turn. My turn, I'm going to flashback deep, and he's going to use COP green, and I let it happen, which was a bit of an error, but I didn't know what I was going to draw, and if I wasn't sure what I might like to discard. So on my turn, I go ahead and just firebolt down his Jeskai Sage, even though it gives him a card. Play a Merfolk Looter and pass. If that looter lives, then I get to start going to town. And he plays Journey to Nowhere on a Mongrel. He's worried about his life total, which is wonderful. So looter does live, and well, you know how good that is. Alright, so he's going to try to hit the Mongrel, so I'm going to respond by using a pesky Root Wall. He's going to try to COP the Mongrel again. I'm going to respond with a Fiery Temper. He'll try again, and in response I'm going to use an Arrogant Worm. Finally, Arrogant Worm resolves. My opponent's out of mana. Wild Mongrel resolves and becomes white, and now COP green resolves, but he has to pick the Arrogant Worm because there's no Mongrel in play. I go ahead and pay the Fiery Temper's Madness, the Root Wall is Madness, and I smash in with a gigantic 6/6, 7/7, 8/8 Wild Mongrel, and my opponent is exactly 8. So he was at 11 this turn, but even with COP green and triple activation, he wasn't able to stop the dog from sicking him, and as the dog tends to do. The Wild Mongrel was once described as the best grizzly bear ever made. Now, I think that Tarmogoyf isn't quite a grizzly bear, but has long since taken that title. But you can actually see in these games why Wild Mongrel was so feared and respected at one time. Alright, so I've got a new opponent here, and I have a turn 2 Merfolk Looter, and he does not have removal. Oh gosh, music to my ears. Alright, I get a turn 3 Wild Mongrel pass off of Ash Barrens. My opponent plays Augur of Bolus into Lightning Bolt, so I was sad. I figured Merfolk Looter would die, but instead he bolts the Mongrel, so I just let it go. I'm not going to try to protect it here. I instead have a pump the Looter in order to get a Root Wall into play. I play a second Looter and pass with Fiery Temper and Circular Logic up. So the Mongrel in the graveyard, I let it go because it's fuel for Circular Logic, and also I had a bunch of great cards in my hand. I just wasn't willing to make the exchange. I'm going to go ahead and send in Root Wall. My opponent can't really afford to block, but I decide I'm going to loot main just to have a best choice on what I want to discard, and I end up Fiery Tempering away his guy. He bolts one of my looters and tries to Seagate Oracle, which I counter because my opponent's down to only 2 cards in hand versus my 4. Make that 5, 6. Okay, so I'm going to send in with Root Wall and pass. I'm totally tapped out, so if he's got Electrickery, I'm really hurt here, but if he has anything else, I'm okay. And what he has is an Augur of Bolus that misses, which is fantastic. Alright, so I can send in the Root Wall again. And for my turn, I play Hardcast to Deep Analysis, play a land and pass with exactly 3 mana up. Incidentally, you always want to try to leave 3 mana up, and one of it should be green, and one of it should be red, and one of it should be blue. That's kind of the ideal situation, and the reason is that if you have that, you can loot into at least one of your plays, and you can cast it. Like you can play Arrogant Worm, Fiery Temper, and Circular Logic off of that combination of mana. You can't play all 3, but what I mean is sometimes you don't know what you're going to loot into. Anyway, so at this point my opponent's got an Augur of Bolus and no cards in hand. He's facing down 4 cards in hand over here with 2 Deep Analysis in the graveyard, so he's facing down 8 cards, 2 Merfolk Looters, a Mongrel, 2 Root Wallers, and with that he just realizes this is an absolutely hopeless board state and scoops, and we move on to the second game, even though he's at 17. And so I get to sideboard in all the yummy stuff. I don't have 4 Pyroblasts, I only own 1, so I sideboard in the 1, but I do have 4 Hydroblasts, so I sideboard those in as well. Alright, so we got a little bit of a slow start here, but it's a turn 2 Looter. It's always a keep. Nearly always. My opponent's got turn 2 Augur into a Electrickery, so that's Not cool, but I draw a Hydroblast for the turn, play a land, or draw a land for the turn, play a Hydroblast, something like that. Anyway, so he's going to send in with his Augur. I'm going to go ahead and loot into a Fiery Temper and take that out so that we're even on cards. Goes for Electrickery. I'm going to try to Hydroblast and protect my Looter. Unfortunately, he has a Dispel, so Looter down. I go ahead and tap Ash Barrens on my turn, pick it up with the Simic Growth Chamber, cycle it off for a Forest, and pass for the turn because I cannot play the Forest since I just played the Simic Growth Chamber, and I can't play the Mongrel because I don't have a Forest. Opponent's turn, he uses a fetch land and goes for Augur Bolus into Counterspell, so we know he's got a Counterspell over there. My turn, I'm going to go for Wild Mongrel right into a Counterspell, which I understand is about to happen, and allows me to play my second Counterspell. Or my second Mongrel. So opponent goes for a Flame Slash. I'm going to try to protect it with Circular Logic. It has a Dispel. So I'm thinking about whether or not I want to protect it, and discarding a Deep Analysis against an opponent like this is probably not the best plan because the Deep is a card that I can use to draw out counter magic like I just did, or just draw cards which will draw more cards. It's too good, I think, and not worth protecting a Mongrel unless the situation, you know, shows me that it's worth it, basically. Alright, so on my turn I play Wild Mongrel, flashback Deep Analysis, opponent bolts in response, so I don't have junk cards to throw away the Mongrel, but I have a Hydroblast to stop the bolt, and I win the exchange. My opponent's down to one card in hand, it's a Flame Slash. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and cycle Ash Barrens in response for a land that I don't want to draw, get rid of 2 lands that I don't need, and a Firebolt to make a 5/5 Wild Mongrel. We're both empty-handed, but I draw a Basking Rootwalla. I send in for 2, my opponent blocks with an Augur Bolus, and I Madness out Rootwalla and kill his Augur. So this is pretty nice because I've got Firebolt in the graveyard and a decent board presence. Opponent plays Harvest Pyre, so that takes out the Mongrel, no hope of saving it, but I do get to smash in for 3 with the Rootwalla, and I draw a Hydroblast. I'm going to smash in for 3 again. My opponent's drawn and held a card. I'm going to play Merfolk Looter, and he's got a Harvest Pyre. It's his last card, so I Hydroblast that. Looter on board, but unfortunately my opponent top decks a Ponder. I'm sure he's looking for Electrickery or some other removal. Instead he finds Mauldrifter into Brainstorm, not removal, which means Looter is active. I'm going to send in a Rootwalla to the Mauldrifter, pump when he doesn't block. I would have pumped if he did block. He used on his, and I'm holding a junk land. Unfortunately, I could have played it, but obviously with Looter in play I don't want to do that. I have Firebolt in the graveyard, which also could have taken out a Mauldrifter, but I don't want to flashback a Firebolt on a Mauldrifter, and yet I would like to save it for a Delver, if that's what he ends up getting. And what's going on here? We're not bugging, are we? Can we skip past this? Uh-oh. Oh, illegal source bug. That was unfortunate because this game ended real nicely. I think he ends up to Evolving Wilds, and then I can't remember what else he does. I end up looting, and I think he finishes the Looter off in response. But I find counter magic and draw for the turn. I hit him with the Basking Rootwalla to 9, and I think I get, I don't remember what I get, but what ends up happening is a Rootwalla takes him way down to like 6, and I end up in a situation where I think, you know, I honestly don't remember how that game ended, but I did win the game. It was an interesting one. I think you would have enjoyed watching it. Unfortunately, I didn't know it was going to bug out. But yeah, I take him down to 6 with the Rootwalla. I just can't remember what exactly happened after that, whether or not I drew Deep Analysis and buried him in card advantage, or just burned him out with Firebolt, flashback Firebolt, because I have 1 in the graveyard. So I know I got him to 6, so if I drew a single Firebolt, that would have been 4 damage plus 2 is 6. I actually don't remember how it ended, but yeah, kind of a frustrating situation. Alright, well, that's Magic Online for you. And you can see against that opponent, of course, not having the extra Pyroblasts was a bit of a bummer. So right now this is what the sideboard looks like. Multani's Decree, I don't know for sure how I feel about it. I'd really prefer to have Ray of Revelation, but then you've got to also splash white, and it might be a bridge too far. So anyone has any ideas there. I don't know what the right answer is ultimately for Boggles, to be honest. Just because Multani's Decree is alright, but it's possible for them to get something like Armadillo Cloak on a creature before I can Decree, and allow that creature to connect and undo so much damage that if I'm in a race situation it could potentially be a problem. Like, that's one of the things I'm concerned about. Also, Multani's Decree, I'm a little bit worried about it against Rancor, but the fact that it does give me 2 life for every enchantment that I destroy makes it somewhat appealing if I am playing a race situation. So I don't know. Alright, well, that's all I've got for now. I hope you enjoyed seeing how this deck's evolving. It still needs, I don't know, it's not perfect, but I really like the deck a lot. I like the way it plays too. It's much stronger with the removal. So we'll see what you think, and I look forward to your suggestions and comments. And that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.